today's episode, we're going to be talking about the earnest money, which is equal or normally known as the escrow deposit. What is the escrow deposit? What does the buyer has to do an escrow deposit when they're purchasing a home? Let's watch this video. Hey everybody, this is Maria la Realtor. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the first step when you get under contract to purchase a home or selling a house. We're going to be talking about the earnest money, which is commonly known as the escrow deposit. What is the escrow deposit? The escrow deposit is a portion of money that is going to be deposited on an escrow account by the buyer towards purchasing the home to an escrow account that normally is going to be handled here in Florida by a title company that have been chosen by the seller. What does this money represent? Is this a gift to the seller from the buyer? No, it's not. Okay, this deposit is going to be used at the end as part of the down payment of the buyer. I'm going to give you an example. If the down payment for the buyer is $6,000 and they did $2,000 escrow deposit, at the end, the buyer only going to pay $4,000 because they already paid in front $2,000. How much is the earnest money or escrow deposit normally is in the contract? Well, it depends on the contract. It depends on what the buyer is presenting to the seller and if the seller accepts it. Normally, it will be between 1 and 3% of the purchase price. If I'm representing the buyer, I normally tell them to do $1,000 if the down payment is not a big amount. Because if it's $6,000 and you only deposit $1,000, how serious can you be? How serious can this offer be to that seller? But if your down payment normally for FHA is 3.5% and conventional you can do starting at 3%, but if it's not too big amount, I will recommend my buyer when I'm representing the buyer to do $1,000 escrow deposit. Now, if the case is that I'm representing the seller, I tell the seller to take minimum 1% of the purchase price. And when I'm representing the seller, I'm gonna tell you why. It can happen that the buyer want to walk away from the contract because they found a better home or because they don't want to move forward and they want to breach the contract. So if that happens in the time and the period of the inspection or the financing or the appraisal expires, then the seller can keep that money. What happens if this contract doesn't close? Where is this escrow money gonna go to? It will depend. If the contract is within the time limits and none of the days has expired, then the money is gonna go back to the buyer. But if any of the days is expired, the seller has the right to keep it. Another question is, what happens if the time of the contract has expired and the seller wants to keep the money and the buyer wants his money back? Well, the truth is that we're gonna go into an ugly fight between the buyer and the seller. So the buyer will fight to get their money back. Let's say, for example, the inspection period has passed. And on the 11th day, they say, you know what, I want to cancel the contract. So technically, the seller has a right to keep the money unless that the loan is denied, that the buyer gets a denial letter from the lender. Then the money goes back to the buyer. But let's say that all the times of the contract has expired and the seller wants to keep the money. So both of the parties, buyers and seller, has to sign the cancellation of the contract and agrees where this money is gonna go to. But if there is not an agreement because the seller wants to keep the deposit of the escrow deposit and the buyer wants to keep their money and they don't get into an agreement, the title company will hold the money until both of the parties agrees to it. It can take months, it can take years. When you are buying a home, it's very important that your agent the person that is representing you during the transaction, keep the eyes on the expiration dates of the contract. The escrow deposit time, the inspection, financing, and appraisal. Because if any of these times expire, your escrow is at risk at all the time. So it's very important that your agent, the person that is representing you when you're buying a house, pay attention to these dates so you don't lose your money. What happens if you're selling the house and your agent, your listing agent, is going to be representing you, and as a listing agent, we're going to keep quiet, because if the days expire on this buyer side, it's not the seller's fault. It's not the listing agent's fault. It's the buyer's agent that is not doing their job. So we're gonna keep quiet because we want to keep that money to our seller. Because honestly, guys, the seller already wastes time because we were under contract and you were not able to close. So at this time, I think it's fair that the seller keeps the money. This is the only thing that I'm going to be talking to you today. I'm going to do a series of every step of the contract because it's very important that you are aware what is included in the as-is contract here in Florida. What can you do as a buyer? What can you do as a seller? And next week, I'm going to be talking about financing period. So if you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all next week in another episode of Kissimmee, Florida Real Estate.